Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1519 of our daily content grind. So this is something I was going to talk about on the news roundup, and I still will for anyone who misses this video, but this is big. This deserves its own video because of all the new stuff we just got all in one drop. So, what you're about to see is a select few pages from something going around that is called the Binder of Revelations. So what is the Binder of Revelations? This is essentially the continuity Bible for the Transformers aligned continuity. You know that massive mess of a story they tried to create between video games, novels, comic books, cartoon? That thing that was supposed to be like all media is connected and it all tells the same story of the same universe. This was the guidebook they were all supposed to use, and subsequently none of them did. So we have a very fascinating piece of Transformers history here. This is what they were originally going to go with. This includes a lot of new character designs, some of which we've seen, but not in this level of clarity or explanation. We also have seen a little bits and snippets of the info in this, but it is extensive. It's incredibly extensive. So what you're about to see is just a small sampling of it, just the things, just so the people who go looking and go, oh, that's a lot, because it is a lot. It's over 350 pages worth. I'm going to show you highlights just so you know exactly what is in there and what to expect. If you want to go see everything for yourself and you have the time to read it, good luck. TFW2005.com has it on their front page right now. You can go there to go take a full read of this. But let me just give you an idea of what is going on here. For starters, this thing is loaded with just information for whoever is writing the next project. Essentially things that are essential. Could phrase that better. So things like what we expect out of a Transformers story, like the actual pacing, the plot, the onus behind the whole thing, as well as the whole Optimus versus Megatron dynamic and what they represent, what they're battling for, what their mentalities are, etc. It's basically so that the established psychology of the characters is maintained regardless of what story is being told, and all of them have this flow of the history that the characters had with each other, what tore them apart, why they are now bitter enemies. Stuff like that. It goes into extreme detail about Transformers history, and it starts in what they call epochs, and they tell the history in multiple ways. The epochs are basically the different major eras in Transformers, starting with major events, like, the coming of Unicron, the rise of the Decepticons, migrating to Earth, those kind of things. All of those are different epochs in the history of the Transformers story. But they also go into extensive detail about the history. So basically, the epochs are a quick summary. Then there is the nitty-gritty details, which go into extensive history. You're looking at over 1 billion years of Transformer history. It's kind of crazy. There is something to point out to all of this, though, is that a lot of this is actually following movie continuity. It's using a lot of material that was inspired by the comic books, as well as material that we come to know as originating from this particular universe, the aligned continuity. That's where you get into like your 13 primes and all that. But in the current history, it all patterns itself off of the movies. So your timetable for Transformers is not 9 billion years of 9 million years, of Optimus and Megatron feuding. The rise of the Decepticons happened, tens of thousands of years ago. We don't have to set it so far in the past. The whole point of setting it 4 million years in the past in the original cartoon is so that they landed before any civilization, any creature that we describe as a proto-human, the origins of our species. That crash happens before they exist, so no history or record of any kind can be kept of the crash. That's why we have the 4 million year thing. Here, not necessary, because the Transformers are landing in modern times. But it does describe all of these different events that happened in the movie. And that general continuity. So, yeah, it's weirdly loosely based. And it goes all the way up until Age of Extinction, I don't want to say. Though what happens toward the end of that is way different. In this version of the history, the Autobots start making nice with the governments after Age of Extinction again. And the story does go into the future as well. Like, it describes how they want Unicron to wake up. It describes how they envision the battle with Unicron going, and how the characters evolve to that. In this continuity, Starscream is still alive and actually sees like a greater good opportunity, so he actually takes command. There's a rise of certain Autobots and even former Decepticons who are on Optimus Prime's personal circle team against Unicron. There is a discovery of the Primes again. There is, the rise of something they call the Ultimate Transformers. It's fascinating. It also describes literally everything that, just so writers have all of these different characters, events, anything that they could think of, for them to tap for potential stories, references, characters they want to use. So, like we have characters like Sam from the live action movies that are also on the same page as Buster, who is really only known from the Marvel US run. And then things like this, Sorry from Animated alongside Michaela. When did you ever think these two would be side by side in anything? But in the human section, it's literally everybody, even the ones that didn't appear. They have, like, do you need some, like, human villainous character? Here's a list of them. Do you need scientist characters? Here's a list of those. So they can keep track of all of these. So, like, if they do bring up a science character, instead of creating somebody new, maybe you can pull somebody from the past, make it referential, kind of keep, like, the history in the franchise, which is a good thing to tell them. It's good to keep those things in rotation. All of these different artifacts were kept track of. Different versions of the Matrix of Leadership, the Covenant of Primus, the 13 relics of the Primes. All of that was accounted for. You have Megatron's gadgets. The gadgets of the week from the G1 cartoon were accounted for in case they wanted to use them for stories as referential material. Look, the Transfixatron is here. And the Voltronic Galaxer, which is a fantastic name. It's the name of my next techno band. I love this. So you have things like that thrown in as well. You also have locations on Earth. Mount St. Hilary, yeah, that's one of them. That's the major location. But the Ruby Mines of Burma, that was only a one-episode thing, just a Deus Ex Megatron, a power source for the original, like, More Than Meets the Eye saga. That's thrown in too. Like, literally, if Transformers had been there on Earth, it's in this book and described just in case they want to bring it back. Different planets from all different sources are included, so you have a view of the entire universe of Transformers at the time. Quintessa from the G1 cartoon. Pizzazz from the Marvel Comics. Regulus 5? That's from Beast Machines. That's where Botanica was. Crazy. They literally, if they could think of it, they threw it in just so you had reference to literally everything. Here's a map of Cybertron. When did this ever come up in the aligned continuity? Maybe in the novels, but I don't remember it coming up in the video games. I certainly don't remember coming up in Prime. But yeah. Here's an entire map of Cybertron. If ever you wanted to, like, figure out how far the drive to Kaon is, there you go. Like, here's your Google Earth it. Google Cybertron it. We have glossary of terms, all the terminology that they have used over the years, all there and accounted for. Oh, hey, do you want systems of measurement? because there's official markings for like measurements. So, how much time is a click or a cycle, a megacycle, a decacycle? It's all accounted for. We have all that accounted for. We also have distance units, which they never use distance units. Time units you hear in Transformers. Their own unique distance units, they usually just default to, meters or feet. That kind of thing. Different types of energon, including the infamous dark energon that both cartoon and video game used in different ways. Completely unaware that one was using it. But yeah, that is included too. Well, things like cosmic rust and all those things that you might encounter across the Transformers universe. Did you know that there's an order to when the primes were created? I didn't realize. Like, I understood there was like Prima was the first. I understood that. But all the others, I didn't know that there was an official order of birth. Which is weird. And I think what's hysterical about the order is that it seems to get more morally gray the farther down we go. Like, the more kids Primus had, the worse they got. Okay, so like, okay, everyone in the top 6 pretty good. Nexus Prime, then we don't get a whole lot of him, but he's made up of partial Decepticons, so there you go. You get into Onyx Prime, which is a little bit weirder, but then Quintus in a lot of fictions gets up to stuff. Liege Maximo definitely does. Megatronus is eventually the Fallen. So it just kind of gets worse. The more kids he has, the worse it turns out. It also defines the 13th Prime. It flat out says that the 13th Prime is Optimus, who is the chosen one who will unite the whole race someday when the time is right. So they describe it either as a reincarnation of the 13th Prime, which, or the one that comes up more often in the book is if he supposedly like in stasis, like his spark was in stasis until Primus felt it was time for him to be born. And that's not an origin I normally hear. Like, a lot of modern fictions and continuities have the 13th Prime as existing alongside all the others, but not something that's like on standby, right? So that's actually a fascinating little detail. And the behind the scenes, like the fluff of it that's describing the world and all that and the universe, basically setting the rules for the entire universe of the aligned continuity, which will then get ignored by every writer, is all laid out here. And it's fascinating how much comes up. But we're not done. We need to go into all the cool designs that we didn't get to see. And there's a few things to cover before we get into the design process. For instance, astrology. Transformers has astrology, didn't you know? Since we've removed the 13th Prime from the equation, that means that there are just as many primes as there are astrological signs. So they actually turned the 13 primes into astrology. Whereas these days we have the current Age of the Primes toy line, which tells us all Transformers are descended from one of the 13. Well, this just flat out tells us they are like cosmic beings and like guide your life the way that astrology supposedly does. And all of them have their different nuances and personality types, and all the character bios in the book will show you that they are, based around one or another. This is where their alignment lies, which is a weird thing to think about. I'm also going to say, if you go read the book, the character section is the part where you really notice the fact that this file has been added to. So the original publication for the file was 2009. They updated it in 2010 when they moved it to a different program. And the last updates were in 2015, meaning even into RID 2015, which is the last of the aligned continuity, they were still updating it. So like Strong Arm is in here, even though she's obviously not a character they developed in 2009. So keep that in mind when you're browsing through. It might get a little bit weird in that. Also keep in mind, all the character listings have tiers to them. They listed tiers for all of the characters in this creation Bible. And they get interesting. You got to remember, this is late 2000s, like 2009, 2010, when all of this was compiled together. Yeah, they had some interesting ideas at the time. For instance, there's combiners in here. All of them are low tier because Hasbro wasn't using combiners at the time, and they weren't interested in combiners at the time because they didn't know if they would sell well or not. So things like that are fascinating in this book. You get to see where Hasbro valued each and every character, because it was always determined by popularity and how many uses and how often the character showed up in fiction. Inferno is a B rank I throw out there just to show you that the ranks can be nonsense, because Inferno was a B. Waspinator's in the book at like E. Like, it goes all the way down to G rank. So Waspinator very low on the list, even though he's more popular, better well known than Inferno, who famously was a shelf warmer and financially unpopular amongst kids. So things like that. Weird little things to keep in mind. Shockwave C-Class, by the way. Didn't stop them from using Shockwave in Aligned, but hey, that's the nuts and bolts of it. So let's take a look at Optimus Prime. Now, this design I have seen before. This is this big, buff, burly Optimus Prime that we were denied. We've seen this, but again, this file provides us greater clarity on the whole thing. And new angles of him, too. Flex Prime. What's fascinating here is what he's holding. That's the Siege Axe. So a little bit different in design, but you can see where the design eventually went until it became a toy. It's crazy to think that was drawn in 2009, and it took until Siege for them to actually work it into a toy line. Crazy little details like that. But yeah, generally I like this Optimus Prime. I like that you can see where there's movie influence to him, like the shoulder pieces, for instance, and the doors being part of the chest, but also doing its own things. The wheels inside the torso. It's more, War for Cybertron, which was a thing in development at the time, so that's probably where that came from. And the smokestacks on the forearms are weird, because only Armada Prime did that, but not in that way. Let's take a look at Bumblebee on the end, and then Bumblebee is a bummer. I do not like this Bumblebee design. He's way too scrawny. He looks he's just way too spindly. Not digging it. This one I don't think I've seen before. This Megatron I've seen before. A lot of this was reused for the Covenant of Primus books. So you have seen these as like the historical stuff they like to throw in, but there's plenty here that I don't think we've ever seen before. It's a killer Megatron, by the way. Again, you can see where there's movie influence in the design, especially if you think of like the Revenge of the Fallen look. And a little bit of the movie one with that backpack, too. But yeah, cool design. I like this one. The Starscream is fascinating to me because the vehicle mode definitely shows elements of the movie Starscream. The colorization, the dark tones of it, give me more vibes of the original Masterpiece colors, which is weird. And the overall design certainly is not meant to invoke the movie Starscream. The legs are not digitigrade. He doesn't look like a giant Dorito in robot mode. He looks like just he almost looks like a zombified Starscream. He almost looks like a dark Starscream, if that could be a thing. And then there's Soundwave, and Soundwave is what I always thought he would be someday, which is like a surveillance van. Which, okay, that's actually awesome. The design's way too busy. The design is way too busy, but okay, cool. Okay, sure, you do you. At least it was in the right direction at some point. Here's a fascinating one. Let's get into some of the movie-influenced characters. Ratchet is this fascinating blend of his original G1 self and his movie self. In fact, it's using the G1 windshield from the toy that none of the full models use outside of War Within, I think, use those. Like you have to go to like other pre-Earth Cybertronian stories to spot that. I like that they used it though. It's fun to see. Also, this answers this huge thing that we've had in the fandom for a while. It was the speculation that We had Bulkhead in Transformers Prime because they didn't want to confuse kids by throwing Ironhide into the Prime cast as the big Hulk of the team because he had just died in the movie. So if they saw him come back in the cartoon, they were afraid it would look confusing. And when you see Transformers Prime, that seems absolutely ridiculous. But when you realize this was originally going to be the Ratchet design they went with, now it doesn't seem ridiculous anymore. There's a little bit of credence to it now, which I find fascinating. There's also a Sideswipe in this book that is a merger of his movie self and his original G1 self. It's not a bad looking Sideswipe. If anything, it gives him a little bit more personality than the G1 design typically has. I can still do without the digitigrade legs, but at least I gave him feet. I will accept that at the very least. You'll also notice on all of these, they do show the polarities, which is, their astrological 13 that they align with. So they always try to keep them somewhat in the vein of these different characters. It's silly. It's silly, but it's worth mentioning. Here's the Jetfire, and the Jetfire, weirdly enough, takes after the Titanium, which is to say the War Within version. It's weird. It's weird to see like this. I don't know how I feel about the wings being all the way up there. That is a choice. That looks like a strong breeze would knock Jetfire over. I don't think that's fair to him. Also, just as long as I'm thinking about it, something else that's fun about going through this book is we're still in late 2000s, meaning that they didn't have all the names copyrighted anymore. So, like, Hook is in the book, but his name is Hightower. Someone named Clampdown is in the book, though he's described as a helicopter. Okay, figure that one out for me. There's fun little weird oddities like that in there. But to continue on, Mirage, which would have been cool to see Mirage in like the aligned continuity, and I don't mind the look at all. Mirage is one of those characters that just barely ever gets used, and he's still marked as a C tier character, even though we barely see him in anything. Oh, but you remember how I said combiners were very low tier? Here's Swindle. E tier. Remember, they only went down to G. And G being characters that they just flat out didn't use. Yeah, it's not a bad Swindle design. You can definitely see like the movie influence behind it. All the artwork in this is very movie influenced, though you can see where the Prime designs are starting to exist. But yeah, that's the fate of most of the combiners. Very low tier, please. Basically, Hasbro saying, please don't use these. We don't want to design a combiner. Don't mind a triple changer, though. There's my boy Blitzwing. Look at that. Like, that is a stud of a Blitzwing. That is a beefy Blitzwing. And what gets me about that Blitzwing is it's doing things very differently than a standard Blitzwing does. He's got the cockpit chest that we only saw in the Thrilling 30 figure, but he's also using the treads for shoulder pads. That's different. The wings end up on his arms. That's very different. And you can see it's very small here, but the vehicle modes are definitely going for different approaches. All purple jet, all beige tank mode. The tank mode is an H tank. You can see the wings on the back treads, so that's apparently part of how the toy was imagined to work. And then you can see like treads in the back, like between the tail fins of Blitzwing jet mode. That's not aerodynamic in the least. But it might be better than having gigantic blocks under his wings. Might be preferable. We can look at a few beasts. Here's Grimlock, who, remember, at the time was barely being used. Like Age of Extinction was just like barely a thing in this one, and then RID 2015 hadn't happened, so Grimlock hadn't had a good resurgence. But he's still a B tier character because of his old popularity. So good on him. We do have Optimus Primal in the book too, but his name is just Primal to avoid confusion. We did get a sick look at Cheetor's design though. The green gives it just like a little bit of Beast Machine's influence, but beyond that, he's looking pretty good. He's a very sharp Cheetor. Looks very inspired by Ravage from Revenge of the Fallen. That's the vibe that I'm getting. And speaking of, there's a few movie exclusive characters in here. Here was the original take on a non-movie Barricade, and I actually like this. I do like the idea of like the fender wings rather than the door wings. I do like he still retains like the big hands with the tires behind them. That's good. That's his character silhouette. You can see they pasted in a photo of his vehicle mode, which is just, the generic Decepticon from War from Cybertron. Like I said, they did go in and update a lot of these, so that could be like a last-minute inclusion. Obviously, that is not what Barricade looks like in the games. But yeah, I don't mind that design. If that had been like refined and put out in Transformers Prime with like the arms and those fender things still part of the design, I don't think I would have minded it at all. I think overall it would have been a good look. Here's another fun one. Look at Omega Supreme. Look at that big potato of an Omega Supreme. Now, Omega did appear in the games, but not like this. Not like this. So, like, you can tell where artistically, they did not stay consistent with a lot of these character designs. But yeah, he's just like this big spud of a character. I kind of like how he's got this St. Louis Arch thing going on with the tank treads. Like, or with the tank tracks. The railroad tracks that go around him. That's fun. That's funny. It looks like he's trying to part form less. His base mode kind of just looks like he's sitting down with an arm up and one arm taken off. But hey, it's cool to see they were thinking about him. Cool to see they're thinking about him at least. E-tier character, because at the time they hadn't used him since G1. Well. Here's where the biggest loss comes from. Out of everything I saw in the book, here is where I hurt the most, because I would have loved to have seen this. Behold, the original design of Megatronus, and that design is gorgeous. Oh my god. Okay, now it makes total sense for his design elements to look like the Decepticon symbol, because, yeah, like, he's supposed to be the inspiration for the Decepticons. But he's got a very Galvatron vibe to him, right? Like, he very much looks like he looks like he's already been reformatted by Unicron. Look at him. Look at how cool he looks. Look at how sharp he looks. Look how dangerous he looks. Like, that, yeah, I would buy that as a major villain. Like, I like this better than the Megatronus that showed up in the Machinima series. I don't care if he sounds like Mark Hamill. Like, he's got a big bishop hat on. Like, I can't take him seriously. This is cool. Oh, we should have gotten this. We should have gotten this. I'm going to leave you on that. This is a very long video. I apologize for that. But I am saving you a lot of reading. Like I said, I think this is about 40-odd pages out of 350 something. If you want to go see all the profiles and pictures for yourself, like I said, it's on TFW 2005's front page right now. Keep in mind, the whole Aligned Bible, this whole compendium, was a $250,000 project from Hasbro between all of the writers and artists that it took. And none of the writers for the shows or the cartoons or anything for the video games, none of them used it. Which is kind of funny, but also kind of sad. And you can see how much we missed out on. There's some really good stuff that got left on the floor, and I'm upset about it. So, whether you've seen it for yourself or not, please let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I'm curious to know what the vibe on all of this is. And as always, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.